you consider as a terrorist organization, right?
In part.
No. In part?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well,
is it a terrorist organization?
In part.
Is it a terrorist
in the same way that the
organization?
Republican movement in Northern Ireland was in part
No, in the same way
terroristic
that
and
your
in part
government is a
political.
terrorist organization in part.
Well,
your government is a terrorist organization.
Is that your view?
That doesn't make sense.
Is that
Either
your view?
you're a terrorist or you're not.
No, organizations can be partly terroristic and partly political. You know that.
Just for your information, Hezbollah was created.
Professor Marandi entered a British media interview and turned the spotlight on the interviewer. Rather than simply responding, he demanded the same level of evidence she expected from him. When the host cited a UN report claiming Mahsa Amini suffered a skull fracture and brain swelling, Marandi asked her to name the mission and investigator behind the findings. She couldn't, revealing a reliance on commonly repeated claims rather than direct knowledge of the report. He then broadened the discussion, pointing to cases in the UK where people faced consequences for displaying anti-genocide messages. His argument was simple. If he must prove every claim, why shouldn't everyone else? The exchange exposed what Marandi sees as a double standard in public discourse. He argues that this pattern has shaped Western policy toward Iran for decades and continues to influence today's growing tensions.
One is that because of the U.S. sanctions and the European sanctions, basically because of Iran's policy against Israel,
What is Iran's policy against Israel?
Yes, because
the
whole sanction, Iran's position
against Israel, yeah.
Yeah, Iran says that Israel is an apartheid state. It is not morally legitimate, and that Palestinians have the right to return, just like apartheid South Africa.
That it shouldn't
and
exist.
And back then,
that it shouldn't exist. It's not. Is that
no?
What you mean?
As an apartheid entity, no.
But
apartheid should not exist anyway. When your government was
I'm just trying to get a sense from, because you're close to the Iranian regime, I want to get a sense of whether...
What does that mean exactly? I'm close to the Iranian regime. Is that how you introduce academics from your own country?
No. In the way that I know that I'm close in terms of having easy access to and contact with and conversations with members of the cabinet. That's all I meant. I didn't mean...
Would you call them the regime?
Well,
would you say it like the...
Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, sure. Well, what's the question?
Well, have there been regular democratic elections that...
No, you were talking about Israel.
Oh, okay, we'll go back
Iran's
to that.
position on Israel.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of whether
Iran's position on Israel is identical to its position on apartheid South Africa. When your government was supporting the supremacist regime in South Africa, the Iranians were supporting the ANC and Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
The same logic applies to Palestine.
Right. So it's not the existence of Israel, it's the nature of this Israeli state. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
That Iran's opposed to.
The state,
not its very existence.
The state could be called Palestine, it could be called Israel, it could be called Walt Disney, but as an apartheid state for Iran, this is not acceptable.
And isn't Iran something of an apartheid state, particularly if you're a woman?
Have you ever been to Iran?
No, but there's lots of countries I haven't been to that I know about, hear about, read about, speak to people about.
It's not an apartheid state. No, it's not an apartheid state.
Women are dragged off the street for not wearing the veil?
No, that's not true at all.
It is true.
Well, you can say it's true, but that doesn't make it a fact.
I think most people listening know that it is true.
I live in Iran. Many journalists come to Iran. Journalists that you can invite, Jewish journalist Max Blumenthal from the Grey Zone, invite him on your show. And he's been to Iran just recently for a couple of weeks. He went to different cities on his own with his wife. There's also a journalist. Ask him if any women have been dragged off the streets anywhere that he's been to.
So you're denying that the Iranian government forces women to wear the veil, the hijab?
Well, veil is one thing.
I know it is. That's why I corrected myself. And those that don't want to...
You mean a headscarf?
The headscarf.
A headscarf.
And those that don't want to cover their hair, it's trouble for them, isn't it?
No, nothing happens to them. No, nothing happens to them. And some of my students on campus, in classrooms on campus, they don't wear headscarves. So I think your understanding.
But is your I'm just trying to get a sense. Is your assertion that in Iran, in the last decade, and even more recently than that, not a single woman, particularly a protesting young woman, has been detained and in one case died in custody with wounds from beating because she had her hair shown. You don't believe
You're
that
talking
happened?
No. Mahsa Amini had no wounds. There is no footage. There is footage of her, and in the footage, there is nothing that shows that she was beaten. She had a precondition. Yes, she was taken in, but she was not beaten for her dress. There is a law in Iran about a dress code, because whether you like it or not, they believe that the way in which the West promotes women is sexualization, commodification, objectification. So they'll have their own cultural boundaries, whether you agree with it or not.
Well, you've said to
whether
me
you agree,
okay,
whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't. That's one thing. But women being dragged off the streets in Tehran, I've never seen that happen myself.
No, but
this
that
is like
mean
when
it
they keep
hasn't
saying
happened,
gays in Iran are executed. I've never seen a gay person in Iran executed.
But
this is sort
that doesn't
of
mean it's
myth
never happened. Does it?
No.
Just because you haven't seen a woman being dragged off the streets doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
No, I'm not saying it's never happened.
And you are wrong to say,
London,
if I can just say,
you
are wrong to say that Mahsa Amini had no injuries. She had physical injuries, including a skull fracture and brain edema.
No, she didn't. No.
Well, an independent medical analysis and a UN fact-finding mission determined that she did.
There was no UN fact-finding mission in Iran. Where are you getting this information? What was the name of the UN fact-finding mission team, the name of the person who did this?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can find it for you. But you can say that about any statement that I make.
No, but the thing is that
I could do it back to you.
No, because you can't, because the point is that you have to give me names. If I say in the UK, people are being arrested for saying no to genocide, for having a billboard in their hands, no to genocide, they're being arrested for that. I have to show footage of it happening. And I have to show the law saying that this is how it's done. And when you tell me that if you tell me, has a woman ever been dragged away? I'll say yes. If you say that have people been beaten on the streets by the police, I'd say yes. In protests and riots, it happens. Well, if you tell me innocent people have died in Iran in prisons, I'd say probably yes.
Well, it's interesting.
But when you tell, and I would say the same about your country as well. And I would say the same about your country. But in your country and in the West, the caricature of Iran is very far from reality. And the reason is because of your country's hatred for Iran, which has been ongoing for 45 years. If Iran was so deeply despised, then it should have collapsed by now, so long ago.
But when you say, you ask me...
And then your government and your media is concerned about human rights in Iran, where you support Israel, not you, I mean your government, you support Israel, you help Israel in Gaza, you have the flights that go overhead.
We support the rights of Iranians as well. We support the rights of Iranians.
No, you don't. You actually are a country that tries to harm Iranians because you impose sanctions on ordinary Iranians. The maximum pressure sanctions. Do you think the maximum pressure sanctions hurt a government minister?
You know the reasons.
They're intended
to
make ordinary people suffer.
You might not like it, but you know the reasons for that. I mean, can I just come back to you on one thing?
What are the reasons? Because since I don't like it, you should tell me. What are the reasons for the sanctions?
The reasons include the proxy terrorist activity that's been, I would argue, I'm sure you are going to disagree with me, but the proxy terrorist activity that Iran has been involved in for decades.
What are these
now.
Who are these
Hamas, others arming Syria.
So Hezbollah you consider as a terrorist organization, right?
In part.
No. In part?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is it a terrorist organization?
In part, in the same way that the Republican movement in Northern Ireland was in part terroristic,
in the same way that your
government
is a terrorist organization in part. Your government is a terrorist organization.
Is that your view?
That doesn't make sense. Either you're a terrorist or you're not.
No, organizations can be partly terroristic and partly political. You know that.
Just for your information, Hezbollah was created out of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. It was a creation of the occupation. Just like the ANC was a terrorist organization and Nelson Mandela was a terrorist according to your government standards at the time, Hezbollah was created When the Israelis invaded Lebanon and took Beirut.
But you do know, surely, as an academic, that organisations can be terroristic and political and have wings which are both, and social as well. The Republican movement in Ireland certainly did.
So you're saying that the political wing of Hezbollah is not a terrorist organization?
It has connections to a terrorist organization, yeah, but it operates on different levels.
So it's not a terrorist organization?
In part, it is.
Look, I know you don't want to answer the question. From our perspective, Hezbollah is a national liberation organization that has recovered the South Lebanon and saved Lebanon from Israeli occupation and colonization. And Hezbollah's sin is that it supports the Palestinian people. Hezbollah has been resisting the Israeli regime, and it opposes the regime and the ethnic cleansing and the genocide. Your government, your media supports the genocide. You like Israel, you like what they do, and you consider them to be in your camp. Obviously, we have huge differences because Hezbollah has not carried out mass slaughter, and Israel has. And your government supports despots, countries that have zero elections, but they're not regimes.
But Hezbollah did carry out mass firing of missiles into Israel as well, just to report a fact back at you.
Israel invaded Lebanon multiple times. It took Beirut, and Israel bombs intentionally apartment blocks in Lebanon. Just today, it destroyed houses in southern Lebanon. Almost every day, it carries out assassinations.
I'm just making the point that the fire isn't just in one direction.
It's actually, you're proving a point. You're proving a point that the Israeli regime, which carries out murder and slaughter, is normal, and it is not a terrorist organization. But Hezbollah, when it responds with far less fire capability and without killing all these civilians as the Israelis do, they're the terrorists. Or partially terrorists.
And
that standard of yours, and it's not just you, it's your country, it's your government, it's the entire Western political establishment, is the problem. It is the problem in our region.
And a problem
because you are choosing despots and you are choosing regimes that carry out ethnic cleansing as your allies because they serve your interests.
If I can speak, you say that is the problem. Iran has agency. It's making some of its own choices. Some of its people are currently protesting very vocally about the conditions they find themselves in, which I know some of which is related to sanctions. The women 2 years ago, many women were protesting about the conditions they find themselves in. However you characterise it, I will characterise it differently if I may, and I will equally characterise it.
I didn't characterise it. I didn't say anything. You asked me a specific question about an individual. Did women protest 4 years ago or 3.5 years ago?
They did.
Yes, many did. Did students protest? Yes, many did. Did people protest 3-4 days ago on the street in Tehran? Yes, people did. But the rioters, they're a different group of people.
What should the Iranian government's response to, or what will, in your view, the Iranian government's response to the protests and what they're calling for and complaining about, what will it be? What's it likely to be in your view?
Roxana, on the first day of protests, they were peaceful. Was anyone arrested? Did the police attack anyone on day one? That's when the protests were bigger, actually, in Tehran, right? Now we have small riots here and there where they attack the police, they shoot at the police, they throw Molotov cocktails, and so the police responds. But on day one, there was no violence.
So for your
and the government, because the government recognized their protests as legitimate.
So for you, the Donald Trump
the question for me is the question for me is that in your country, if there are protests in Iran, you don't see this as a normal process in civil society. You see it as the regime, as you like to call it,
protest
the regime on the verge.
Protest is normal. I haven't said it's abnormal at all.
But in your country, if there are protests, and we see police officers
we question all
hammering
the
people.
time. We question all the
And
time.
they hammer, but that's a part of the process.
We
No, but
question
here
all
in
the
Iran
time.
is treated
Hang on,
different.
I'm going to insist on speaking here because I live here. You've said that to me a few times in this interview. I live here. I'm telling you that in this country we frequently ask questions about how protests are policed and decisions that are made by government in response to protests. It is a very active. It is a very yes, but I'm just reminding you because you made the comparison between the two countries that here it is very normal for those protests A to happen, B to be policed, questions to be asked about how they're policed, and questions to be asked about what political decisions are being made around them. It has been a very live conversation in this country for many, many decades. I must leave it.
Let's break down what this interview actually exposed, because it wasn't simply a tense debate between a professor and a journalist. What viewers witnessed was a real-time look at how much of the Western media narrative surrounding Iran is constructed and maintained, not necessarily through outright falsehoods, but through selective standards, unchallenged assumptions, and a framework that often. Let's break down what this interview actually exposed, because it wasn't simply a tense debate between a professor and a journalist. What viewers witnessed was a real-time look at how much of the Western media narrative surrounding Iran is constructed and maintained, not necessarily through outright falsehoods, but through selective standards, unchallenged assumptions, and a framework. Determines who is viewed as the victim and who is portrayed as the threat before the discussion even begins. Professor Mirandi systematically challenged that framework throughout the interview. The most revealing moments centered on the discussion of Mahsa Amini. The interviewer confidently stated that Amini suffered a skull fracture and brain swelling, citing what she described as that often determines who is viewed as the victim and who is portrayed as the threat before the discussion even begins. Professor Marandi systematically challenged that framework throughout the interview. The most revealing moments centered on the discussion of Mahsa Amini. The interviewer confidently stated that Amini suffered a skull fracture and brain swelling, citing what she described as independent medical analysis and a United Nations fact. Independent medical analysis and a United Nations fact-finding mission. Marandi's response was simple but powerful. He asked for specifics. What was the name of the mission? Who conducted the investigation? What evidence could viewers examine for themselves? The interviewer couldn't provide those details. That moment mattered because it highlighted something larger. The issue wasn't whether Mahsa Amini's death was tragic. It unquestionably was. Her death sparked nationwide demonstrations and became one of the most significant protest movements in modern Iranian history. The grief, outrage, and political consequences were real and widely documented. Marandi's point was different. He argued that specific medical conclusions should be supported by the same level of evidence expected in any serious discussion. While numerous allegations and reports emerged regarding the circumstances of Amini's death, competing claims and disputes over the medical findings also existed. Yet much of the Western coverage often presented one interpretation as settled fact without fully acknowledging those disputes. He wasn't denying the protests, the deaths, or allegations of police misconduct. He was questioning whether the standards used to verify claims were being applied consistently. That challenge became even more significant when he turned the focus toward Britain itself. Marandi argued that if he made claims about restrictions on protest or freedom of expression in the United Kingdom, he would be expected to provide clear evidence, legal references, and documented examples. Yet when discussing Iran, broad assertions were often accepted without the same scrutiny. He pointed to incidents involving protesters and activists who had faced police intervention under public order legislation. Whether one agrees with his interpretation or not, his larger argument was about consistency. Why, he asked, are some claims treated as self-evident while others demand extensive proof? That question left the interviewer struggling to respond because it shifted the conversation away from Iran and toward the standards being used to discuss Iran. The exchange concerning Hezbollah exposed another major contradiction. The interviewer described Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. Marandi pressed further and asked what exactly that meant. When the discussion moved toward the idea that a group can be both political and militant, he applied the same logic to Western governments. If violence for political purposes is the defining standard, he argued, then governments responsible for wars, military interventions, drone campaigns, or support for devastating conflicts should also be examined under that same framework. The discussion quickly became uncomfortable because it highlighted a question rarely addressed directly. Are labels such as terrorist being applied through a consistent principle, or are they influenced by political alliances and strategic interests? Mirandi's broader point was that definitions often change depending on who is carrying out the violence and whose interests are being served. The conversation then moved into history. Mirandi emphasized that Hezbollah emerged during the period of Israeli military occupation in Lebanon. Regardless of how one views the group's actions today, he argued that its origins cannot be separated from that historical context. To reinforce his argument, he drew comparisons to anti-apartheid movements in South Africa. Organizations and figures now widely celebrated were once labeled extremists or terrorists by governments. That later changed their position. Nelson Mandela himself remained on certain U.S. watch lists long after becoming a global symbol of justice and reconciliation. His argument wasn't that the situations were identical. Rather, it was that history often shows how political labels can evolve depending on changing geopolitical interests. The apartheid comparison led directly into one of the interview's most controversial subjects, Iran's position on Israel. Marandi argued that Iran's criticism of Israel is often framed in the West as uniquely extreme, while similar arguments against apartheid South Africa were once viewed consistently as morally justified. If you found this breakdown informative, he maintained that the make sure to like the video, self-determination, share it with someone interested in international discrimination, should be applied to the channel, consistently and leave your thoughts in the country involved. Thanks for watching. Strongly, and I'll see. He argued that broad economic sanctions affect far more than government officials. According to him, they impact access to medicine, financial services, technology, trade, and countless aspects of daily life. His central claim was that sanctions are often presented as targeted measures, but frequently produce consequences that fall heavily on civilians. The interviewer defended sanctions as a response to security concerns and regional activities linked to Iran. Mirandi countered that these policies function primarily as tools of pressure designed to weaken the country economically and politically. Once again, the debate returned to the same core question. Are these policies genuinely motivated by concern for human rights, or are human rights arguments being used to justify broader geopolitical objectives? His challenge was straightforward. Apply one standard to everyone. If evidence matters, it should matter universally. If human rights matter, they should matter regardless of alliances. If accusations require proof, then proof should be required no matter which government, movement, or country is being discussed. Whether viewers ultimately agreed with his conclusions or not, the interview demonstrated how powerful that challenge can be when applied. Whether viewers agree with that comparison or not, the discussion highlighted how historical parallels can challenge established narratives. The sanctions debate may have been the most important section because it dealt with the everyday lives of ordinary people. When the interviewer suggested that Western governments support the Iranian people, Mirandi pushed back. If you found this breakdown informative, make sure to like the video, share it with someone interested in international politics, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see.